let's work on mobilizing a thoracic spine with just our bodies and no props. All right, so the spine has got multiple ways of moving, and it's important to try and use that as much as possible when mobilizing the spine. So the way I like to start here is just by simply crossing my legs. If you feel you need to sit on a block, feel free to do so. Personally, I don't need one, so I will just stay like this. When we think about the thoracic spine, we think about this area, so the area that is located in your rib cage, okay? So what you are going to find difficult is your hips will stay locked, which is one of the reasons why I like to perform this seated. But on top of it, it will be quite hard to explore if there are areas that feel a little bit tight or not willing to open up. So it's important that you bring awareness to this. So I'm going to give you different ways to explore first, and then you can start moving into a bit more of a flow. I interlace my fingers and then I place them behind my head, first of all. You give a gentle push here to lock your neck. And what we're going to try and do first is explore a little bit on the lateral flexion. So lateral flexion means that we start stretching sideways. Try and avoid collapsing forward or back, and try to avoid collapsing. Use a little bit your core to support that movement and keep that spine quite long here. So I want to try and find this length in my lats, in my QL, and in my transverse. Once I find a decent amount of stretch, we're going to start taking twists in this motion. So we're going to start leaning the body a little bit more towards the hip, and then we're going to try and turn that chest towards the ceiling. So we're going to try and look up. So you can see my head wants to do the movement, my chest struggle a bit more to do that movement, and then we're going to keep going this way. You can do as many reps as you want. Then you repeat the same to the other side. Yes, so make sure you take that time. I'm obviously speeding up through the process so I don't have to spend a substantial amount of hours here. The next thing we're going to do is go into a flexion. So for this, I'm going to place myself this way so you can see. And flexion here, what I'd like you to focus on is, rather than leaning back into your lumbar, try and think more of it as really rounding that upper back. You can see what's happening in my shoulder blades here. I'm really pushing into my flexion. So try and not pull too hard on the neck as well. Keep your neck still pushing into the hands. However, just try and really round that upper back. And then you can do the same thing. You can start taking twist towards the right hand side and some twist towards the left hand side. Obviously take that time. As you come back, reset if you feel the need to reset here, yeah? Try also avoiding riding the shoulders up. Try and keep that neck nice and long. Just make that space between the shoulder blades and push that spine between the shoulder blades before performing your twist. And the spine extension will be very similar, except that again, try and pay attention to not load into the lower back, but instead think about lifting up the rib cage. So this for me is very difficult because I tend to flare up my rib cage. You want to try and not flare up the rib cage so much, but instead use the back muscles here to lift. So you can see if I just dump, if you observe, my rib cage is starting to flare out. But when I then pull a little bit more into my upper back, so I push into my hands, and then I use my upper back muscles a little bit more to lift, and then I use my core to close up my sternum slightly. I can feel that lift into a spine extension, my thoracic spine. But again, as I explained, this is like my hardest part. And then you can perform the same thing. You can start doing some twist in this position. Yes? So try and keep that chest. As you can see, this is like my tough part. This is really hard for me. But one more reason to work on. So it's important for you to bring that awareness into which part you need to work on, okay? The last part, once you've done these exercises, we can start linking it up the same way, but moving it into a flow. So you can start bringing your chest in and round, taking a little twist towards the right hand side, taking yourself into a lateral flexion, And then taking that twist in the spine extension. We're bringing the spine extension up. We twist ourselves to the other side. Lateral flexion. Going to twist with a flexion. Back to center. So I'm linking up every little bit of movement we've just done here. Yes, so again, when I bring in flexion, I take a little twist. Obviously, again, I'm speeding up through the process. I take a lateral flexion. As I take a lateral flexion, I start looking up towards the ceiling. Chest is gonna come up into an extension. I'm gonna go into twist here. Slowly roll back into a lateral flexion. Take myself into a spine flexion, upper back rounded, and back to start. This is very fast. Take your time, yes? So if you want to build up to that, start just doing this broken down movement and then start linking up the movements afterwards. All right, I hope that helps.